Thanks for tuning in. I'm Joel Amadon.
And I'm Ann Monroe.
And this is The Teacher's Journey, Mile Markers on the Road to Better Teaching, a podcast series where we discuss stories of teacher development.
This podcast is brought to you by the University of Mississippi School of Education and is an Amadon Planet production.
Here we go. Dr. Erica Avent is in the house. Wow, or in the Zoom room.
She's in the Zoom room.
The Zoom room.
One of my favorite teachers of all time has joined us.
Not a favorite. I feel honored.
Oh, I mean, seriously, the science experience that my son had in your classroom, and then being able to get the reports about his performance in your class on a either weekly or semi-weekly. It's unbelievable. Awesome. Awesome.
So I'm so intimidated by both of you, and having had an impact in both of your children's lives. It's just like, wow, like I'm one of their favorite people. They're two of my favorite people. So that's very interesting to hear that from you.
Well, I call Dr. Amadon, you probably know this. I call Erica my Avent angel at the school when she was at the school, any school where she was at where George was, she was my Avent angel because I would text her, can you please check on this? Or what would I do? All sorts of crazy stuff like, do you see him? Did he know he's supposed to get a ride from? Did he do this? Did he do that? And she'd be telling me all sorts of, don't you worry, I'll go tell him. I'll make sure he gets on the right bus, or he does this or does that. Or one time she saved me. At the last minute, he wanted to try out for basketball. Do you remember that, Erica?
Yeah.
He didn't know anything about it until the day of. And he's at school. And I think I don't know what he did. He went to the office or something and asked me if he could go get on the bus to go to the middle school for tryouts. I'm like, what? Hold on a minute. And so I call Erica, what is this? Can he get on the bus? Don't worry. Yes, I'll make sure. And I didn't have to worry. She was my Avent angel at the intermediate school.
And this is just an example that teachers go above and beyond.
That's exactly right.
for these parents out there. So Erica, again, legend in the Zoom room, but can you just take a minute to introduce yourself to any of the listeners out there?
Sure. My name is Erica Avent. I am a 17-year veteran educator. I received my bachelor's, master's, specialist, and doctorate from the University of Mississippi. So as you can tell, it holds a special place in my heart. My love for education has taken me everywhere from Holly Springs School District, which was my starter district, to North Panola School District, to working in curriculum, to Oxford School District. And now I am back in Holly Springs School District as the Assistant Federal Program Director, Assistant Curriculum Director, and Director of Student Assessment. A lot of titles, yes. But it deals with teachers now and administrators now more than it does with students. But my reach is just a little more broader because my love for education transcends all of that.
Well, and can you, and I know go off script here, but you also do a lot with, leadership with NEA can you just touch a little bit on that as well? Cause I think that's, showing these ways to get outside of, some of these titles from within a district. There's also ways to pour into teaching from outside too. Like, can you?
So true. So, as we do now, I graduated in 2005 from university. And so in 2004, I became a member of Teachers of Tomorrow, and I got my membership into Mississippi Associations of Educators. And at that time, I just thought it meant, I'm covered with insurance when I go into the classroom, not realizing that it would have a direct impact on me. You think about MAE, but I'm not really thinking about the fact that it is a part of NEA, the National Education Association. And I got into MAE, didn't do nothing the first couple of years. I was in grad school, just dealing.
Mississippi Association of Educators, just in case if people are wondering, but keep going. Yep, sorry. Mississippi
Association of Education, it was just like, I have insurance. I was just a member. I was covered.
Right.
And around 2014, I took part in a program called TLI, which was the Teacher Leader Initiative out of NEA. And that is when doors started opening for me on a national mindset. So I did a capstone project that dealt with African American boys and bringing in African American mentors to those young men. And that capstone project blasted out. I have presented on it on a national level. I've written articles about it. I have been in policy papers talking about it. It helped me to become a teacher leader. A lot of times in education, you think in order to lead, you have to leave the classroom. And so this is my second year away from the classroom, but I was a teacher leader before that. I was within my classroom being a teacher leader. Yeah. And so now I work with other teacher leaders who, there's so many of us, we don't want to leave the classroom. We're content in being in the classroom, but we want to fix problems. We want to help students. And so I help to develop teacher leaders throughout the state of Mississippi now. I'm actually working with TLI now, actually, as they're revamping the program. I'm working with some other states that have TLI and with their teacher leaders.
That's great. I just love that. I just love the power of organizations, of teaching organizations. Some people, not aware, and they need to tap into it. And like you said, start off with like, oh, I need insurance, got your insurance. And but then all of a sudden, like, what else does that lead to? What opportunities could be out there? And so I just thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. So we're going to start, Dr. Avent. We're going to start with thanking 3 teachers. I know we're going to limit you to 3, but like, I know that there's many, many out there. 3 teachers who have shaped your development as a person.
Wow. Okay. How hard and fast is that 3? Because I have a 4th one. So how hard and fast do we stay to 3?
You can, we can make an exception here.
Okay. So if that's the case, I have 4. My first teacher would be Miss Phyllis Campbell. She was my 2nd grade teacher. She is the teacher that realized that I was bored, that 2nd grade work was not challenging me. And so she would I would do my 2nd grade work, and then I would have to be at my blue folder that had 3rd grade work in it. Mm-hmm. And so she was the first person to make me realize I can do more. I don't have to just sit and be bored. There's always something that needed to be done. And so to this day, she has been a part of my life. I send her a Christmas card every Christmas. She texts me once a week on motivational words. And so she was my first inspiration.
That's awesome.
My next teacher was my 4th grade teacher, Miss Odom. She came into my life at a pivotal point. My parents had divorced, and I had changed schools, and I was floundering. I went from being an A student to being an F student. And being a child of divorce and being a child of poverty, I didn't realize that I needed glasses, and she did. And I didn't want to tell my mom. And this is a teacher who she made sure I got glasses. My mom was a single mom at that time. She made sure I got glasses. But then not only that, she would keep me in for special times and recess times to get me caught back up on the things that I had missed out on half a year because I couldn't see. And when I think of my 4th grade year and everything I went through, she was my 4th grade year. She made me, I could have so easily walked away from school and hated it, but it was because of Miss Patty Odom at Scott Central Rebels, who made that year for me.
Nice.
My 3rd teacher, high school, Michael Miles. Hands down is the reason why I'm at the University of Mississippi. He is a diehard Mississippi State fan. He's my advanced math teacher. And I felt like I was in love when I was in high school, my senior year, and I was going to go to a neighboring college because my boyfriend was going to be going there and everything. Mr. Miles got with my counselor, Miss Shoemaker, made sure all my stuff was turned in for Ole Miss, got with my dad to get me at an orientation, and I literally walked on campus and fell in love with this campus. And so had it not been for me, he would always say, I'm not saying you can't go to this college, but where else have you looked at? He always talked to us, the math, about having options. And he was like, I feel like you're limiting yourself. Look at some options. And so at that time, I was a biology major. And so he was like, you need to go where biology majors go. And that's the University of Mississippi. And so he pushed me that whole year. Once I determined that, yes, I am going to Ole Miss, he was like, okay, let's figure out a plan. And he was like, you're behind the 8 ball because you waited a little bit longer, but we're going to get this. And so between scholarships, and when I tell you he paid fees for me to submit scholarships and application fees and everything, he was my person. Wow. And my last person would have to be Dr. Ethel Skurlock. I came to the University of Mississippi, and everyone told me that I had to take this professor. And it was like, you have to take her. She's in Afro-American studies. And I had never studied Afro-American literature when I was in high school. And I literally stalked this woman. She wouldn't take freshmen. She did not take freshman students. She said, she was like, y'all are just not ready for me as a freshman student. You come here, you used to be in the top of your class. And if I give you any critique, you're very upset about it. Wait until you're sophomore. And so I stalked her for a whole summer until she finally let me into her class. I was one of 2 freshmen in there. And I never forget my first paper that she bled red all over. She was like, don't come, y'all just marinate on this paper and come see me on Tuesday. And it was a Monday. And I think like 10 minutes later, I was at her office for office hours.
You ain't waiting.
We need to talk about the paper. She's like, oh my God. But the writer that I am today is because of her. My love of African-American literature is because of her. Had it not been for her, I imagine all the books that I would have never been exposed for because I had never been exposed to them prior to her. So those were my 4 inspirations.
Nice.
I've heard about Miss Odom before. I remember that story about the glasses and the 4th grade, and like it just makes me want to cry every time you tell that story. But just I don't know. I think that's amazing, and just the care that Miss Odom had to notice, to fix the situation. And then the whole thing about catching you up, I think is the part that just touches me the most, that want in her to make things right.
Yeah.
I think that's unbelievable.
Yeah. And just even to point out too, and just thank you for sharing, was about being the child of divorce, like I'm also a child of divorce, and like knowing that, man, that was a rough year. And like, it wasn't really about the academics, but it was about like having that warm classrooms with, those warm, demanding teachers that were there for you, that would, maybe they didn't know everything that was going on, but they were willing to, work with you to help you transition or whatever. Like, they saw that there was more than just, it was more than just the homework and the tests that was going on. There was other things. And so I don't know, just seeing people seeing students as a people and not just as, just those that are receiving content, so love that. Thank you for sharing that, Erica. So 2 reasons or events that led you to become a teacher. What were those spark moments? I mean, you kind of mentioned a little bit with some of your thanking of teachers, but I don't know, what were those 2 things?
I came to the University of Mississippi as a biology major. I was going to be a doctor. As I said, my parents were divorced. I grew up seeing my parents struggle financially. And so as a lot of kids that come from homes of poverty, I wanted to get a great job so that I can take care of my mom and my brother. That was my focus. And so I never thought that being a teacher would do that for me. So it was never anything that I said, oh, I want to teach. And so I was going to be a doctor. That's what I was going to be. But the whole time I here at the university, I would volunteer with Leapfrog. Like I was always working. Like I always had a teacher heart. I was the kid that was teaching during the summers to my little brother who I took care of. And so I got the opportunity to do a rotation where you shadow a doctor or whatever. And so I remember shadowing a doctor. And it's very pivotal in my life because I remember a young lady who had to be maybe 13 or 14, and she was pregnant. And I remember thinking, I want to say I was maybe a junior, and I was thinking, wow, this kid is having a kid, and here I am in college, and I forgot to take the metal off of the ramen noodles when I cooked them last night, and she's going to be responsible for a whole human being. And I remember thinking, does she have somebody she can depend on? Does she have a Miss Odom? Does she have a Miss Campbell?
Yeah.
Does she have a Mr. Miles? And it stayed with me that year, and it stayed with me the next year. I still was biology major. It didn't just push me until then. Till finally, I was miserable because I was like, how can I help other kids like her? I'm a relationships teacher, and so I wanted to form those relationships. And so it literally, I was a senior biology major who literally the summer for my senior year, I changed my major to bring in education. It's one of the hardest decisions I've ever done because it meant I had to be a fifth year senior. I had to tell my parents. I had to tell them I've changed my whole life course, but it was literally the best decision I've ever made in my life. My second experience will probably be my mom is dyslexic. So I've grown up my entire life having to sign documents and fill out forms. And I never realized it was dyslexia because every time she would read stories, the stories would always change. And growing up as a child, I never caught it. And then when I got older, I realized that reading came hard for her. And so she would talk about how she struggled in school and that she never had anybody to make her feel like she could be successful. And it was because no one ever took the time to realize that she had a reading disability.
Yeah.
And so when I decided to go into education, again, I said I was going to be somebody's answer, like somebody should have been my mom's answer. I'm going to be that teacher that catches those things that could have made a difference in her life had they just took the time to see this is not a kid who wasn't a bright. This was a kid that literally just was crying out for somebody to notice that she needed help.
That's awesome. I love it. I mean, and even like we talk to our teacher candidates about writing those statements as they enter into phase 2 of our program about what kind of teacher they want to be. And like right there, you're just like, I want to be the teacher that my mom didn't have that I had, I got the glasses, but who was there for my mom to give her what she needed in order to be successful. That's wonderful. So we're talking about we're on the teacher's journey. We're placing mile markers on your path to better teaching. Now, you've had you're having a excellent career in teaching. And so I know that there's a number of them. So we're picking one, Erica, one.
I got you. You gave me my extra person. So I'll give you one mile marker. I can compromise. Okay.
So you place one mile marker on your path to better teaching. And so what artifact would you use to represent your mile marker?
I would say my artifact would be exposing kids to opportunities. And I say that through, I'm going to use through trips. Okay. So my third year teaching, me and a co-teacher decided, hey, let's take some kids and take them out of the state. And it was like, we're not talking about going to Tennessee. We're not talking about going to Atlanta. Let's take them to New York. And literally people say, y'all gonna take kids to New York? Why would you do this? But we was like, we're gonna do this. Let's make this a culture trip. And so it was one of 2 trips that I was able to participate in. And our first trip was to New York and our second trip was to Washington, D.C.
Nice.
The worlds we opened up to these kids by these trips will still impact me to this day. Like, the whole, and it's little things like going through the airport with a line of 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th graders.
Oh my gosh.
Parents and kids, and people are looking like, where are y'all going? I just need to know, well, what flight are y'all on? And it wasn't that they wasn't well behaved or anything, but these kids were just in awe because for the majority of them, they've never been on a plane before.
Oh, yeah.
And we wanted to give them the opportunity. You know, you could do trips like this and you do buses and stuff. We wanted to do an airplane specifically because for both of us, we had never flown. I did not fly till I got to college. And she did not fly till her senior year in high school. So we wanted to give that opportunity to those third through sixth graders of flying. I remember when we got to the airport coming from Mississippi and to see so many, the diverse people on every single step that you took, it was huge for them. And so they're like, Miss Brantley, did you see that? Miss Brantley, and it was like, okay, we're not going to point. But yes, I did see that. Just letting them see the places that they've only read about. This trip took place in 2008, 2009. So this was after 9/11. So, you know, to see all these different places that they have never, ever experienced. And so because it was a culture trip, we researched, we wrote papers about it. They had journal entries. We talked about, we on the airplane, they had to write about how does it feel to be in our airplane right now? Was it what you thought it was going to be? I mean, are you afraid? So we've turned it into a true cultural learning experience. I have kids now that come back and talk about those trips. And so that was a mile marker in my life because it told me I wanted to open up my students to opportunities that they never knew existed for them.
Well, that's what and right before we hit record, you showed us the picture. And I think that would like represent like this trip. I mean, like, you think about everyone that's in that picture, they could probably point to that same picture and say, that was a mile marker of my development as a person. Like, you know, like they would be talking about that as like a moment, right? That they would be placing that mile marker as well.
And then also, Erica, I love that the joy that's coming from your voice telling about this opportunity that you were able to give these students, you know, how much joy that brought you. Obviously, you know, brought them a lot of joy and, you know, other things, but just that it's just that enjoyment of knowing that you're opening them up to something that they wouldn't have experienced otherwise. And I that's just exuding from your voice as you tell the story. And I just think that's awesome.
Well, I think the joy came in because we knew we wanted to take the kids on the trip, but we didn't have any idea how we was going to get these kids to on this trip. And I remember the first parent meeting and we was telling parents, hey, we're going to New York. And it's like, oh, it was like, we want kids to go. And we was like, we don't know how we're going to get there, but we're going to get them there. And we're going to give them the opportunity to fundraise to get there. You know, you're going to have ownership of your trip. And so I remember we had a compact where all the kids wrote, I take ownership. This is my trip. I take ownership of this trip. I'm going in the parents. And it brought this community together. Like when I tell you we was doing fish fries, we did a haunted house, we did cookie dough. We was selling cookie dough. Literally, kids would run up, hey, you want to buy this cookie dough? I got some good cookie dough that I'm selling. Right now during the pandemic, everybody's selling popcorn. We was hustling cookie dough back in the day. And I remember kids used to come up and they'll say, hey, Miss Avent, I need to turn in this money. And so it was like, okay, I should have this. Like they had a checkbook where they had their deposits and withdrawals to their trip. And they knew how much they owed and where they was at with it. And so it became a community, not just a district thing. It became a community thing. And it helped them to cement that if you have a dream, there's a way to reach it.
Oh, yeah.
Someone can point you to how to get to it.
That would be interesting. Like, I mean, we were just talking about that today in class. Like, you know, if you put the cap on an experience, like, you know, kids will rise to that experience. But what happens if you take the cap off, right? And like you said, like we're going to go to New York, and like whoa, and like to think about what kids did that, you know, maybe another, you know. Somebody else might say, well, a kid can't do that. A kid can't raise money. A kid can't and the fact that they kept probably like over and over again, like proving people wrong with their actions. And like, because you provided the opportunity for, we're going to do something big and you have ownership of it. And like, that's awesome stuff. I love it. So why, and you did this, I'm going to ask it again, but why was this mile marker important to your growth as a teacher? And if anything you need to reiterate, but I'm just going to put it out there.
it it enforced me not to put limitations on not only what my students could do, but what I could do. So I started out in the school district, and it's a critical needs school district, and it doesn't have as many resources as neighboring school districts. And so my first 2 years of school, I was in grad school, and you study all this theory and you study all this, past leaders say this is that and other, but that application is very, very hard when you're doubting yourself and you're doubting your students. And this trip helped me to not doubt. It was like, you know what? We're gonna see Lion King on Broadway. If that's what y'all want to see, that's what you want, we're gonna make it happen. And so it helped me to realize I can do whatever I put my mind to for my students. It helped me to stop limiting not only them, but myself. Because prior to that, I did limit myself. It was a woe is me. I'm a teacher of these kids and I want to do this, but I can't. And I just feel bad because I can't. And it took all of that off my plate and was like, okay, I need you to buck up and let's figure this out.
Nice.
And then I'll also say too, like, Erica, you continued to do that. I mean, I know that was something you took away from that experience, because I also know what you've done since then in terms of making opportunity. Not waiting for it, or not, like you said, saying, well, we can't because of this or because of that. Like, I've seen you make opportunities for your students throughout your career. And I'm particularly thinking about when you were at the intermediate school and you saw a need you had boys at your school that were getting in trouble. And you saw this unequal number of Black students who had, I believe it was like in-school suspensions or some sort of disciplinary issue. And instead of waiting on somebody else to tackle the issue, you said, this is something that needs to be tackled. And I know you started, I don't know if you'd call it you can talk about it, but like a mentoring project, but you reached out to some folks at the university and had them come over and talk to these kids and almost created like a club. Do you want to talk a little bit about, I just thought that was cool. I can't remember, there was a name for it, but
positive interactions. And so at that time, that was also something I did for teacher leadership, but it was something I went to my principal about, and I was like, hey, there got to be something better than ISS for these kids. Like, this is not working. And so luckily I had a very supportive administrator who was just like, okay, you brought me a problem, so bring me a solution. And so with a lot of these boys, the common denominator was that they didn't have a male figure in their lives, or they had a male figure who was in and out of their lives. And they really just needed somebody to show them that it's cool to follow rules. There are consequences. Let me talk to you about these consequences. And so we started the positive interaction, which was basically a lunch club for some African-American students. And we brought in African-American male mentors who came in their own way and just spoke with these boys, talked to these boys. But these were African-American mentors that had been through what they've been through. They had, they came from homes with just their mom, or they had a dad who was incarcerated. They've had to battle peer pressure of gang violence. And so it was very influential in these students' lives, because when you have a Terrence Metcalf that comes over who they all want to play football, and you have somebody like Terrence Metcalf that talks about, okay, you want to play football? Well, you are your brand. And if you're constantly getting in trouble, who wants to invest in your brand? Because who I can tell you is that universities don't want to invest in your brand, if that's the case. And the NFL don't want to invest in your brand. And when you have people like Ron Upshaw talking about how, coming from a single parent home doesn't determine how far you can go in life, or Dr. Brian Buckhalter talking about, if I can survive Katrina, you can survive 8 hours in a class being your best and doing your best. And so bringing in those influential people, these kids started looking forward to their weekly, who's coming this week? Who's coming this week? Who's going to talk to us? Because not only did they tell them their story, they listened to the boy's story. Right. And they talked with them about, okay, then, so how could you have handled that? What would have been a better way to go about that? So we're using that to determine what we're going to do in life now. And so it served as a catalyst for these boys that, you know what? I can step out of this. I don't have to be stuck in this moment.
Yeah. And Joel, when Erica's talking about this, it's making me think that all of these mile markers we've been hearing over the past few weeks since we started the podcast, I didn't really think about it until Erica sort of said it out loud, is that she made the opportunity. She is the one that made the opportunity where the mile marker was stuck. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I'm looking back and thinking about all the people we've talked to over the last few weeks and how so many of them, it was an opportunity they created for themselves that created these moments of development for them that became these really important mile markers. Like you have Marianne Parker deciding to sign up for that writing symposium. You have Austin Jones, who decided to get involved with the Sunflower County Freedom Project. You have, it's these teachers that are taking initiative to either provide themselves an opportunity for professional development or provide an opportunity for students outside of the classroom, just sort of this extra, all those extras. We talk about teachers. And Erica at the very beginning, she introduced herself and she had all of these roles. We laughed, she said, I'm this federal director of programs. I'm this. As teachers, we're really good at that. We're really good at taking on, roles and we can also be really good at creating opportunities. Yeah. And I just thought about, Erica, you said it out loud, but it's this, you created the opportunity and it became this really important mile marker. And you saw, I can do this. And then you've been doing it for years. And think about the number of students that are influenced because you stuck your neck out a little bit and decided, I think I might do this trip. This sounds crazy, but I think we can do this, and created this opportunity that becomes this learning experience, obviously for your students, but for you, the learning was, I can do this, I will do this, and it makes a difference. And then the number of students that have been impacted by the continual opportunities you're creating is incredible.
That says something about if I've got a Erica Avent, which you're one of one, but I mean, if I've got I've got these teachers that are, looking at how to invest in the lives of their students, I give them a little bit of margin, maybe a little bit of resources, and just trust them and think about the impact that they can provide. I mean, so think about those educational leaders that might be out there to think like, how can I invest in my students? It might be just how do you invest in those teachers to provide them the space? Because you knew what your students needed there in that situation, and you sought a way to provide it. And yeah, I think that was when we first started interacting. I was learning about that. And I was like, whoa, that's like an amazing program. And doing what you're doing and investing in those students. So, but I guess going back to the trip. And so there you go. You got your 2 mile markers. You got your 2. There you go. That was an assist from Dr. Monroe. She let you have your 2. Fantastic. It's great. You just, all the rules just going, no, it's great. Get some extra credit. You love the extra credit. You love extra credit.
Erica loves extra credit.
I mean, she alley-ooped it for me, so I just had to, dunk it and bring it on home.
No, yeah. She was like, Chris Paul lobbing to Blake Griffin and like just landed home. Fantastic. All right. So now we're going to thinking about the trip. So why was this mile marker important to the field? And so you teach courses here at the University of Mississippi. So you're helping our students and thinking about their development, and we're tying things to standards. So why is this important to the field? So like, what standards would you connect this to?
Learner development. First and foremost, I think that just to take kids out of a classroom and realize that learning doesn't just occur within the 4 walls of our classroom learning environment. Just to go back on what you said about teacher leaders, I think it would have to be, for me, leadership and collaboration.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And I say it because I've said it before and I'll say it again. Districts spend so much money bringing in people to solve problems that they don't realize they have teacher leaders who are problem solvers in their schools. If you give a teacher a problem, 9 times out of 10, they've thought of 5 to 6 ways to solve the problem. So you have a problem with car rider line, get a couple of teachers together that work car rider. They will figure it out because that's what we do. We solve problems. And so with the leadership and collaboration, it literally pushed me to be a problem solver, not for me, but for my students.
I mean, this artifact has a lot of standards you put, check off a lot of boxes, but and just to point out something to that, and then this kind of gets into a little bit with research, but there is some research out there that says most of the time when you're talking about a problem that exists within a school, something that everyone knows needs to be addressed, the solution usually lies within. Like and you look at like how teachers responded to the pandemic, a lot of times when I've seen it done well, when the leadership brought in their teachers together and like, how are we going to attack? There's a lot of good solutions, a lot of creative solutions happen. All right. So you have a pocket-sized philosophy statement?
My philosophy statement has evolved since the pandemic hit. So, prior to the pandemic, my philosophy statement has always been that be a teacher, be a toolbox. So no two students need the same tool. You have to learn your students and learn what tool they need. Do they need a sledgehammer to knock down preconceived ideals? Do they need a screwdriver to help them tighten down things that they just don't feel like they can? You just have to figure out what tools you need to provide for your students. And even no two students use the same tool the same way. Right. But as a teacher, it's just for me, I'm the tool collector. So I'm collecting tools and then I'm just giving them out however my students will need. With the pandemic, and even after the pandemic, at this point, my philosophy is show up for the students that are showing up. I mean, we're behind. The pandemic hit. We know as educators that we'll be recouping this time away from schools for years to come. And so at this point, these kids just need you to show up. They just need you to give them some sense of normalcy, because this is a new normal. We sent kids home for spring break, and that was it. Yeah. They didn't get to finish out the year. That was the last time they hugged their teacher. Think about the kids that walked away and were mad at their teacher about something. And that was it. Right. They didn't get to right that wrong. And so we just have to give them a normalcy. Yes, we're still in a pandemic. Yes, we're still wearing masks. Yes, the world is still on this side. But guess what? I am your light within all of this crazy. Right. I'm going to show up and be here for you. So if you show up, I'm showing up. We're going to be here together, showing up together.
And just like how you showed up for the kids when planning that trip, lots of different tools in the toolbox you pulled off for them as well. Anything else you want to say, like how you might see this philosophy statement or how your mile marker development might be seen in this philosophy statement?
I'm sorry, repeat that for me.
I didn't state it well. So the influence of your mile marker on your current philosophy statement. How can we see the influence of this mile marker on your philosophy statement?
If I go, and I'm not going to go to the one that I've gone to now, just with the pandemic, but prior to the pandemic, just providing a toolbox for my mile marker at the trip. For some of my kids, I literally had to show up and just sit down with the parent and say, hey, he wants to go on this trip. And if you will sign this permission slip, he's going to go. Whatever needs to be. I had to negotiate with parents. Well, he did it. I said, I totally get all of that. But if you will sign on this permission slip, I guarantee you, he's going to get all his work done. He's going to work to achieve this, and we're going to get him to New York. So I had to become a lawyer. I had to negotiate with people, but we was figuring this thing out. For some kids, I became a financer. I became a banker. We was trying to figure out how we was going to make dollars and cents to get them there. For some kids, it was literally the thing of, if you want to go on this trip, I need you to open your mind up to writing about it. I need you to talk to me. I mean, we're going to negotiate. How are you going to publicize this? How are you going to tell the world about this amazing trip? And so for some kids, it opened them up to photography because they want to document their trip through photos. Yeah. For some kids, they wanted to journal. I didn't limit them with whatever they wanted to do. And so I provided them whatever to, so you want to do photography? Okay, then let's look into some famous photographers. Let's look into some techniques. Let's talk about how you're going to do this. Oh, you're going to need a camera. Let's figure out what we're going to do, because we're not going to be, at that time, you have the little box camera and we're not going to be doing it. What can we do? Oh, let's see about maybe getting an iPad donated that we can use to do this trip. Nice. So I pulled out all of those negotiating tools and talking tools and all those different things for them.
Nice. All right. So let's try resources. We're any resources come to mind, Dr. Monroe, as you're listening to this episode?
As I'm listening, I'm thinking about Jerome Bruner. So I was just teaching this in class the other day, so it's fresh on my mind. But this idea, we talk about Bruner's ladder, about these real world experiences, giving students as close to a real world experience as you can is the best for learning. So I'm thinking, here's Erica taking these kids on this trip and trying to make something, trying to give them an experience, right? This real world experience and all that opens up to them. So I'm thinking, in my mind, as I'm listening, Jerome Bruner's on my mind because we were just talking about him. And of course, there's so many books across the years with Jerome Bruner, but even starting in the 1960s, up into the 1990s and 2000s and things he's been writing about education, but just this idea about the experience, the real world experience, and that bottom rung of that Bruner's ladder that's so essential to learning. If we can provide that for students, we know that that's best. So just thinking about him, and we'll put some of his, foundational pieces in the, what do we call it, Joel? Show notes.
Show notes, yes.
I'm learning about my podcast speak. Like the process of education or the culture of education, In Search of Mind, some of his seminal pieces, I think would be, it's just good to be thinking about those things. And obviously he's a, psychologist talking about cognition, but it's about giving kids those experiences. And that's sort of what Erica is speaking to with her mile marker.
Yeah. And I was thinking too about necessity. There's this thing called the necessity principle from Gershon Harel. He was talking about proofs and stuff, but it was basically like putting kids in a situation where all of a sudden something is needed and they're like, oh man, I wish, and all of a sudden they're like saying, oh, I wish I had the distributive property, or, oh man, I need to understand order of operations in order to figure out this problem that I'm now invested in solving. And so we could go back through the recording and think about all the different problems that were created by saying, we're going on a trip, and in how kids were invested in helping to solve those problems. And that made you have to be like a 3-ring circus trying to negotiate all these different things, but still they were participating, right? They were like figuring out, selling the cookie dough, keeping track of their finances, figuring out how they're going to document it, like all these sorts of things that they wanted to learn about. Like maybe that kid doesn't learn about photography if this problem wasn't put in front of them. Like, how are you going to share this experience? And so that necessity principle is something that I think we need to use more often. And how do we put, and I've even seen Dr. Monroe shared an experience about how they would sell, I always say these wrong, poinsettias,
yes,
for a class trip, much smaller trip than going to New York, but it's still a trip. And they use that as a way to, like, a problem-based learning, right? So there's a need there, and we're going to use all these different subject areas. We're going to use it in a way that's authentic, that kids are getting something out of it. And so, I don't know, that just rose to my mind, this idea of you create this sort of messy problem, and then all these sorts of tools are going to be needed in order to solve it. So I love it.
But this trip ties back to School of Ed. So I don't know if y'all remember, but when we did the big portfolios back then, one of the things was to plan a plan a trip, and you planned it without any thought of money. If you had to plan a learning opportunity and you had to incorporate learning opportunities in different subjects and this, that, and the other. Because I remember doing this for a class, and I planned a trip to Africa, and it had all type of different learning activities. I had a board on it and everything. Yeah. So it's something that we used to talk about in class, providing that opportunity. If money wasn't an issue, what would you do? And how would you make this an educational thing? And so when we started with this trip literally came about because students went to see Lion King on Broadway. And it it rolled from there. And I think the payout for me was sitting in, we went to see it. Every single kid was in awe. Like when they start coming down the stands, the steps, and they have all of the masks and everything. And you saw all 50-something of these kids just in awe of the Lion King. And I remember looking over my assistant superintendent at the time. I looked over her and she was like that to me was the thing.
That's
Circle
awesome.
Life. There we go. That's awesome. That's great. Well, thank you, Erica, for joining us on this episode. And thank you for tuning in to The Teacher's Journey, mile markers on the road to better teaching.
This episode may be over, but the journey to better teaching continues. Please subscribe to the podcast so you're notified when the next episode hits. And if you like what you hear, please rate and review the podcast. You can also share the podcast with someone you feel may be interested in these stories of teacher development.
And are you ready to start your journey to better teaching? Send an email to Nick Sisk, nickf@olemiss.edu. He's the School of Education's admissions counselor to hear about all the options for becoming a teacher or educational leader. Or perhaps you are well into your journey and looking to further advance as a practitioner or researcher in your field. For more information on all of our graduate programs, contact the University of Mississippi School of Education's Graduate Studies Office by sending an email to gradeducation@olemiss.edu. Or if you want to do a doc program, you can also email me at jcamidon@olemiss.edu.
Also, follow the University of Mississippi School of Education on social media at Ole Miss Ed School on Twitter and Instagram, so you can learn more about the opportunities like free graduate application weekends. Information can be found in the show notes for this episode at roadtobetterteaching.com. And finally, thank you to Dr. Erica Avent for sharing a portion of her journey with us. Thank you so much, Erica.
Thank you to all of you listeners out there for taking the journey to better teaching. This world is a better place because you have used the gifts you have been given to teach others.